"Sit down, miss, or I'll have security escort you off this plane." The words sliced through the cabin as passengers turned phones raised. 16-year-old Jasmine Washington stood trembling, her presentation folder clutched to her chest. "But this is my assigned seat," she whispered, voice cracking. The flight attendant's expression hardened. Not anymore. A hush fell. A businessman shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. The humiliation burned, but Jasmine didn't know this injustice was about to ignite something far greater. Within minutes, her quiet defiance would unite 200 strangers, ground a flight, and spark a movement that would echo far beyond 30,000 feet. Jasmine Washington tapped her pencil nervously against her notebook, her eyes fixed on the digital clock in her bedroom. 4:30 in the morning, and sleep had completely abandoned her hours ago. How could anyone possibly rest on the biggest day of their 16 years of existence? Tomorrow afternoon, she would stand before hundreds of environmental scientists and present her groundbreaking research on urban heat islands in predominantly black neighborhoods of Chicago. Just breathe, she whispered to herself, running her fingers over the acceptance letter from the National Climate Research Conference. The prestigious invitation had arrived 3 months ago, triggering a whirlwind of preparation, late nights, and practice presentations in front of her bathroom mirror. For a girl from the south side of Chicago, this opportunity might as well have been a golden ticket. Jasmine had spent years collecting temperature data across different neighborhoods, documenting how concrete jungles absorbed heat differently in areas with fewer trees and parks. Her findings showed temperature disparities as high as 15 degrees between affluent downtown areas and the historically redline neighborhoods where she lived. The bedroom door creaked open and her mother Kendra peeked in. "Baby girl, you still awake? I knew it." She entered carrying 2 mugs of chamomile tea sitting beside Jasmine on the bed. "I can't sleep, Mum. What if I mess up? What if they don't take me seriously?" Jasmine accepted the warm mug, inhaling the soothing aroma. "They invited you because your work matters," Kendra said firmly, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "But I need you to remember something. When you walk into that conference room, some folks might see your skin before they see your science." Jasmine rolled her eyes affectionately. "Mom, I know you've only told me 100 times, and I'll tell you 100 more." Kendra squeezed her daughter's hand. "You'll have to work twice as hard to get half the respect. That's just how it is. But you've earned this moment. And look what I got you." She pulled out an envelope from her pocket with a flourish. Jasmine opened it and gasped. "First class, Mom. These tickets must have cost a fortune. Been saving since you got accepted. My baby's not flying economy to the biggest moment of her life." Kendra's eyes shone with pride. "You deserve every bit of luxury on this journey, but your car repairs can wait another month. This couldn't." Kendra tapped the ticket now. "Try to get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." Morning arrived in a flash of activity. Jasmine triple-checked her presentation materials, packed her carefully selected professional outfit, and reviewed her notes one final time. The emerald green blazer and pencil skirt they'd found at the thrift store looked surprisingly high-end after Kendra's expert alterations. With her natural hair styled in a neat bun and minimal gold accessories, Jasmine looked years beyond her age. "Remember to speak clearly and make eye contact," Kendra reminded her as they embraced at the bus stop. "I'm sorry I couldn't get the day off to take you to the airport. It's okay, Mom. I've got this." Jasmine tried to project confidence despite her fluttering nerves. "Text me when you land, and when you get to the hotel, and before your presentation." Kendra straightened Jasmine's collar with trembling hands. "I will. I promise." Jasmine hugged her mother tightly, inhaling her familiar scent of cocoa butter and vanilla. O'Hare International Airport buzzed with activity as Jasmine navigated her way through the massive terminals. She'd studied the airport map online for days, yet still felt momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the place. Following the signs carefully, she approached the check-in counter, ticket and ID ready in hand. "Good morning," the airline employee, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, greeted her. "San Francisco today?" "Yes, sir." Jasmine handed over her documents, trying to appear like a seasoned traveler despite this being her first flight ever. He typed rapidly, then looked up with a smile. First class to San Francisco? Very nice. And what takes you to California today? I'm presenting research at the National Climate Research Conference, Jasmine replied, unable to keep the pride from her voice. Impressive. He nodded appreciatively while printing her boarding pass. These look like presentation materials. Would you like me to add a fragile tag to ensure they're handled carefully? Yes, please. Thank you so much. Jasmine felt a surge of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. With her boarding pass secured and security successfully navigated, Jasmine found her gate with 45 minutes to spare. She texted her mother to confirm everything was going smoothly, then reviewed her notes one last time. When boarding finally began, Jasmine waited for the first-class call, still hardly believing she would experience such luxury. As she stepped onto the plane, the cool, air-conditioned cabin welcomed her. She followed the signs to first class and found her seat 2B, a spacious leather chair beside the window. This is amazing, she whispered to herself as she settled in, running her fingers over the premium materials and extra legroom. A screen displayed her name. Welcome, Miss Washington. For one perfect moment, everything felt right in her world. She belonged here. That feeling would not last long. Flight attendant Barbara Reynolds had worked for the airline for 28 years, and she prided herself on knowing exactly who belonged in first class. The well-dressed businessmen with their expensive watches, the celebrities hiding behind sunglasses, the wealthy older couples celebrating anniversaries. Not teenage girls traveling alone, especially not ones who looked like Jasmine Washington. Barbara's eyes narrowed the moment she spotted Jasmine settling into seat 2B. She approached with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ticket, please. Barbara extended her hand, despite having already greeted 6 other first-class passengers without requesting verification. Jasmine looked up momentarily confused. Oh, sure. She pulled out her boarding pass and handed it over. Barbara examined the document with unusual scrutiny, turning it over and holding it up to the light as if checking for counterfeiting. How did you come to be in first class today? Her tone carried an unmistakable implication. My mother bought the ticket for me, Jasmine replied, a flicker of unease spreading through her chest. I'm going to a conference. Barbara returned the boarding pass, but continued hovering. We've had some computer errors with seat assignments lately. In seat 2, a businessman, Malcolm Turner, barely glanced up from his financial newspaper. At 45, Malcolm had flown over 1 million miles with the airline. The Chicago-based investment banker was more concerned with quarterly projections than the conversation beside him. 10 minutes later, as other passengers continued boarding, Barbara returned to Jasmine's seat. May I see your ticket again? She asked louder this time. Jasmine felt her cheeks warming as nearby passengers glanced over. She produced the boarding pass again, maintaining her composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. Barbara frowned at the document. There seems to be a problem with your seat assignment. Is something wrong? Jasmine asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The check-in agent didn't mention any issues. Our system is showing seat 2B as needing to be available, Barbara said vaguely. You'll need to move to economy. Malcolm Turner lowered his newspaper, slightly eyebrow-raised, but remained silent. There must be some mistake. Jasmine said, her heart beginning to race. My mother purchased this ticket months ago, specifically because it was first class. Barbara's lips thinned. Well, regardless of what your mother purchased, we need this seat for a priority passenger who will be boarding shortly. Jasmine gripped the armrests. I don't understand. My boarding pass clearly shows seat 2B first class. Young Lady Barbara's voice took on a sharper edge. Do you belong in first class? The question hung in the air, its meaning unmistakable. Several passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Jasmine felt her throat tightening. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Some folks might see your skin before they see your science. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, I belong here. I have a valid ticket for this seat. Barbara crossed her arms. I need to make room for a priority passenger, and I've selected your seat. This isn't a negotiation. Can you explain what makes someone a priority passenger? Jasmine asked, fighting to keep her voice from trembling. I paid for first class, just like everyone else here. Your mother paid, Barbara corrected with a condescending smile, and airline policy gives me discretion over seating arrangements for operational needs. Malcolm Turner finally folded his newspaper, glancing between the two with growing discomfort, but still choosing silence. Could I speak to your supervisor? Jasmine requested, remembering her mother's advice about always asking to speak to management when facing unfair treatment. Barbara's face hardened. I am the lead flight attendant on this aircraft. If you continue to be difficult, I'll have to involve the captain, which could result in your removal from this flight entirely. Now, would you prefer to move to economy voluntarily, or shall I call security to escort you? The threat landed like a physical blow. Jasmine thought about her presentation, the months of work the scientists expecting her. Missing this flight wasn't an option. With her cheeks burning and tears threatening to spill, she made the only choice she could. I'll move, she whispered. Barbara's smile returned victorious. Smart decision. Gather your belongings quickly, please. We're on a schedule. As Jasmine collected her carry-on bag and presentation materials, not a single person in first class met her eyes. Malcolm Turner suddenly became intensely interested in the safety card in his seat pocket. A woman across the aisle adjusted her sleep mask. A couple pretended to be deep in conversation. The walk of shame had begun. 27 steps. That's how many it took for Jasmine to walk from the spacious luxury of first class to the cramped confines of economy. Each step felt heavier than the last, as curious eyes tracked her movement down the aisle. Some passengers stared openly, while others quickly averted their gaze when she looked their way. But Jasmine felt every glance like a physical touch. Excuse me, she whispered as she squeezed past a flight attendant distributing headphones. The young woman barely acknowledged her, continuing her task without pause. Barbara directed her to a middle seat in row 32, wedged between an older man already spilling into her space and a teenage boy with headphones blaring music loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. The contrast between her original accommodation and this cramped space struck Jasmine like a slap. Your seat, Barbara announced loudly, gesturing with exaggerated courtesy. Thank you, Jasmine murmured, trying to maintain dignity as she slid into the tight space. Her knees pressed against the seat in front of her, a far cry from the generous legroom she'd briefly enjoyed. The older man sighed dramatically as she settled in, shifting to reclaim his armrest. The teenager didn't acknowledge her arrival, continuing to nod along to his music. Jasmine felt herself shrinking, trying to occupy as little space as possible. As Barbara walked away with a satisfied smile, Jasmine suddenly realized something critical. Her presentation materials, the carefully prepared visual aids, and backup flash drive remained in the seat pocket in first class. Wait, she called out, but Barbara had already disappeared toward the front of the plane. Jasmine unbuckled her seatbelt and stood apologizing as she squeezed past the teenager. She made her way back up the aisle, rehearsing how to politely request her forgotten materials. As she approached the boundary between economy and first class, Barbara materialized like a sentry. Can I help you? She asked, coldly, physically positioning herself to block Jasmine's path. I left my presentation materials in the seat pocket, Jasmine explained, pointing toward her former seat. I need them for my conference. Barbara's eyes narrowed. You can't enter first class again. Return to your assigned seat immediately. But I just need to grab my folder. It will only take a second. I said, return to your seat. Barbara repeated louder this time. I'll check the seat pocket myself when I have time. Several first-class passengers watched the exchange, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. No one intervened. Please, Jasmine implored, those materials are irreplaceable. I present tomorrow morning. Thanks for watching, and I 100'd you to Fort Down, and I see in places with 40 subscribed to every 16 you're holding up the boarding process. Barbara stated firmly. Return to your seat now, or I'll be forced to have you removed from the flight. Defeat washed over Jasmine. She nodded silently and retreated, painfully aware of the judgmental gazes following her retreat. Back in row 32, Jasmine slumped into her middle seat and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she typed a message to her mother. Something bad happened. Flight attendant made me move to economy. Said my seat needed to be available for a priority passenger. No explanation. She wouldn't even let me get my presentation materials from the seat pocket. I don't know what to do. 3 dots appeared immediately as Kendra began typing a response, but the flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, instructing all passengers to put their devices in airplane mode. Reluctantly, Jasmine complied, feeling more alone than ever. From her economy seat. She couldn't see what was happening in first class, but she could hear Barbara's voice suddenly warm and welcoming. "Mr. Phillips, so wonderful to see you again. Yes, we found you a seat to be perfect window view, just as you prefer." Jasmine strained to catch a glimpse of the priority passenger who had displaced her. Through the narrow gap between seats, she spotted an older white man in a business suit being guided to her former seat by an obsequious Barbara. No last-minute addition, no emergency accommodation, just a regular passenger who apparently deserved her seat more than she did. The realization burned in her chest. Jasmine closed her eyes, trying to focus on her presentation. She mentally reviewed her introduction, but the words kept slipping away, replaced by Barbara's dismissive tone, asking if she belonged in first class. The flight safety demonstration began, but Jasmine barely registered the instructions. All she could think about was her presentation materials. What if Barbara forgot to retrieve them? What if they were thrown away? The backup data was on her flash drive, but recreating the visual aids overnight in a hotel room seemed impossible. As the plane began taxiing, Jasmine tried to steady her breathing and regain her composure. She needed to remain professional to overcome this setback, but the weight of injustice pressed down on her, making each breath more difficult than the last. "You okay?" The teenage boy beside her had removed one earbud, regarding her with unexpected concern. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "You don't look fine," he observed bluntly. "You look like you're about to cry." Jasmine turned toward the window, though she could see little more than the arm of the man occupying the seat. "I just need to focus on my presentation tomorrow." The boy nodded and replaced his earbud, returning to his music. Jasmine leaned back, closed her eyes, and tried to recall her mother's encouraging words, rather than her warnings. But all she could hear was Barbara asking, "Do you belong in first class?" And for the first time in her life, Jasmine Washington wasn't sure she knew the answer. "Excuse me, is everything okay?" The soft question came from a black flight attendant who had crouched down beside Jasmine's seat. Her name tag read, Aaliyah Carter, and her eyes held genuine concern. Jasmine blinked back tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I'm fine," she whispered, automatically. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly unconvinced. "Are you sure? You seem upset." Something in the woman's gentle tone broke through Jasmine's attempt at stoicism. "I was originally seated in first class," she explained quietly. "The lead flight attendant made me move. She said they needed my seat for a priority passenger, but I don't understand why it had to be my seat specifically." Aaliyah's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "I see. And did she give you any specific reason why your seat was selected?" Jasmine shook her head. "She just kept asking if I belonged in first class." A flash of recognition crossed Aaliyah's features. She glanced quickly toward the front of the plane before returning her attention to Jasmine. "I'm sorry that happened. What's your name?" "Jasmine Washington." "I'm Aaliyah." She offered a reassuring smile. "Were you traveling with anything important?" "Any belongings still in first class. My presentation materials for a climate research conference tomorrow. They're in the seat pocket of 2B. I tried to get them, but she wouldn't let me back into first class." Aaliyah nodded. "Let me see what I can do to help you, Jasmine. I'll be back soon." As Aaliyah moved toward first class, Jasmine felt a small flicker of hope. At least someone had acknowledged her situation. Meanwhile, in seat 2, Malcolm Turner was experiencing growing discomfort with the situation. He had witnessed. The businessman had initially tried to stay out of the confrontation, focusing on his financial reports. But Barbara's triumphant smile as she escorted an older white executive to the seat next to him had turned his stomach. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Phillips," Barbara had gushed. "So sorry about the confusion with your seat. Some people just don't understand airline policies." "No problem at all," Phillips had replied, settling into seat 2B, though I don't recall requesting a specific seat. "We always try to accommodate our frequent flyers," Barbara assured him with a conspiratorial wink. Malcolm shifted uncomfortably. After 30 minutes of pretending to read the same page of his report, he pressed the call button. Barbara appeared promptly. "Yes, sir. What can I get for you?" "I'm curious about something," Malcolm began casually. "The young woman who was sitting here earlier. What was the computer error you mentioned?" Barbara's smile tightened. "Oh, just a routine seating adjustment. Nothing to concern yourself with. But what specifically was the error? I book first class on this route twice monthly and have never encountered seating reassignments." "Well, different situations require different solutions," Barbara replied evasively. "We needed to accommodate a priority passenger." Malcolm glanced pointedly at Mr. Phillips, who was now snoring lightly. "So the computer error was, what exactly?" Barbara's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of our seating algorithms." "That's interesting because I'm a systems analyst for financial software." Malcolm lied smoothly. "And I'd be fascinated to learn about these algorithms that somehow identified only the black teenage girl as needing reassignment." Barbara's face flushed. "If you'll excuse me, I need to attend to other passengers." She turned sharply and walked away. Malcolm watched her retreat, then noticed several teenagers in economy class huddled around a phone, occasionally glancing toward first class with disapproving expressions. One of them, a girl with brightly colored hair, was typing furiously on her phone despite the airplane mode instructions. "That's the girl from that climate change TikTok," he overheard one teenager whisper to another. "Jasmine Washington. She's like super smart. Why'd they kick her out of first class?" "Because she's black," another responded matter-of-factly. "My mom says this happens all the time. People are already talking about it online." Malcolm felt a chill. This wasn't just an uncomfortable situation. It was potentially becoming a public relations disaster for the airline, and he had sat silently while it happened. As these revelations unfolded, Aaliyah had made her way to first class under the pretense of offering pre-flight beverages. She spotted Jasmine's presentation folder still tucked in the seat pocket of 2B. "Excuse me, sir," she addressed Mr. Phillips politely. "There seems to be some materials left behind by a previous passenger." "Oh," he blinked awake. "I hadn't noticed." Aaliyah retrieved the folder. "Thank you for your understanding." As she turned to leave, she overheard Barbara speaking to another crew member near the galley. "These people always try to sneak into first class," Barbara muttered. "Give them an inch, they take a mile." "I wasn't about to let some scholarship case take up a premium seat when we could offer it to a real customer." Aaliyah froze the folder clutched tightly in her hands. She had suspected Barbara's motivations, but hearing them confirmed so blatantly sent a surge of anger through her. Without acknowledging the comment, she continued back toward economy class, her mind racing with how to address the situation without jeopardizing her own position. When she returned to Jasmine's seat, she handed over the folder with a gentle smile. "Here you go. Everything seems to be intact." "Thank you so much," Jasmine breathed, clutching the materials to her chest. "You have no idea how important these are." "I have some sense," Aaliyah replied kindly. "National Climate Research Conference, right? I saw the program in your folder. That's incredibly impressive." Jasmine managed a small smile. "I've been working on this research for 3 years." Aaliyah glanced around before leaning closer. "Jasmine, I want you to know that what happened wasn't right. I can't say more right now, but please know that not everyone on this crew shares the same perspectives." With that cryptic reassurance, Aaliyah continued her duties, leaving Jasmine to wonder if she had found an ally among the airline staff. As the flight reached cruising altitude, the subtle ripples of resistance continued to spread throughout the cabin. Malcolm Turner had made a crucial decision. He would not remain a passive bystander any longer. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and stayed silent? Comment number 1 if you think speaking up is always worth the risk. Hit that like button if you believe collective action can change these everyday injustices. Subscribe to join our community of storytellers fighting for a better world. What do you think happens next in Jasmine's story? Will Malcolm step up or step back? Will Aaliyah risk her job to do what's right? And what about the teenagers who recognize Jasmine? Could they become unexpected allies? Stay tuned as this real-life drama at 3000 FT continues to unfold. Malcolm Turner had always considered himself a decent person. He donated to charities, mentored young professionals, and believed in meritocracy. But sitting in seat 2A, watching the empty presentation folder in the seat pocket beside him, he confronted an uncomfortable truth. Believing in fairness meant nothing if you stayed silent in the face of injustice. The businessman unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, ignoring the seatbelt sign still illuminated above. He made his way purposefully toward the galley where Barbara was arranging drink service. "Excuse me," Malcolm addressed her firmly. "I'd like to speak with you about what happened with the young woman you removed from first class." Barbara's smile turned cold. "So please return to your seat. The seatbelt sign is still on." "I'm not returning to my seat until we discuss this situation," Malcolm replied, lowering his voice. "What you did was discriminatory. There was no computer error, was there?" Several nearby passengers turned their heads, attention caught by the confrontation brewing. So Barbara hissed, "This is not appropriate. You don't understand airline policies." "I understand discrimination when I see it," Malcolm countered. "That young woman had a valid first-class ticket. The only error was your judgment." Barbara's face flushed with anger. "If you continue disrupting this flight, I'll have the captain divert to the nearest airport and have you removed." "Go ahead," Malcolm challenged. "I'm sure the airline executives would love to explain to the media why they diverted a flight because a passenger questioned racial discrimination." Their escalating discussion caught the attention of other crew members, including Aaliyah, who approached cautiously. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking between them. "Mr. Turner was just returning to his seat," Barbara stated firmly. "Actually, I was asking why a qualified passenger was removed from first class without cause," Malcolm corrected. "And I'm documenting this incident." He pulled out his phone and began typing notes. "Phones must be in airplane mode during flight," Barbara snapped. "Airplane mode prevents cellular transmission, not note-taking." Malcolm replied calmly, continuing to type. "I'm recording the time seat number and nature of the incident for my complaint to airline management." As this confrontation unfolded, the captain received word of a customer service situation in the cabin. The plane remained on the tarmac, its departure now delayed by 15 minutes as tensions escalated. Meanwhile, in economy class, the group of teenagers who had recognized Jasmine were surreptitiously using the plane's Wi-Fi despite instructions to keep devices off. 17-year-old Riley Chen, an environmental science enthusiast with blue hair and over 50,000 TikTok followers, had recognized Jasmine immediately from her viral videos explaining urban heat islands. "This is complete BS," Riley whispered to her friends. "Jasmine Washington is basically famous in climate activism circles. She's presenting at NCRC tomorrow." "What are you doing?" her friend Zach asked, as Riley pulled out her phone, starting a #Justice for Jasmine. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "Airline just kicked a black climate scientist out of first class for no reason. Racist flight attendant couldn't believe a young black woman belonged in first class. Share this now." Within minutes, the hashtag began circulating among Riley's followers. Passengers with access to Wi-Fi started receiving notifications as the story spread across social platforms. Jasmine, unaware of the social media storm brewing in her name, sat trying to review her presentation notes. The cramped space and emotional turmoil made concentration nearly impossible. She kept thinking about her mother's warnings, the pride they had both felt when purchasing the first-class ticket, and how quickly that joy had been stripped away. A notification buzzed on her phone, which she had forgotten to put in airplane mode. It was a direct message from a stranger. "Are you the Jasmine Washington who got kicked out of first class? The internet is rallying for you. Justice for Jasmine is trending." Confused, Jasmine looked up and noticed several passengers glancing at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to sympathy. The realization that her humiliation had become public sent a fresh wave of anxiety through her. Back in first class, Aaliyah discreetly informed other crew members about what she had overheard Barbara say. Two flight attendants, Michael and Sophia, exchanged troubled glances. "She's been doing this for years," Michael whispered. "Remember that family she made moved to the back last month? Said it was for weight distribution. We can't keep covering for her." Sophia agreed. "This is wrong." As word spread among the crew, a subtle shift in allegiance began. Multiple attendants found excuses to check on Jasmine, offering her extra pillows, premium headphones, and special snacks typically reserved for first class. The plane's delay stretched to 30 minutes. Passengers began to grumble, but many had now heard fragments of what had transpired. The narrative traveled through the cabin in whispers and text messages. They kicked out a black teenager from first class. "She's some kind of scientist or something." Apparently there was no real reason. The attendant just didn't think she belonged there. Mr. Phillips, now fully awake in seat 2B, overheard enough to understand he had been used as a pretext. Visibly uncomfortable, he called Barbara over. "I didn't request a seat change," he stated plainly. "If this young woman had a legitimate ticket for this seat, I'd be happy to switch back." Barbara's professional mask slipped for a moment. "Sir, that's not possible. We've already resolved the seating arrangement." "It doesn't sound resolved to me," Mr. Phillips pressed. "It sounds like you made an arbitrary decision based on questionable criteria." The situation had reached a tipping point. The plane sat on the tarmac now 45 minutes delayed. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a customer service issue that requires resolution before takeoff. I apologize for the delay and appreciate your patience." Moments later, the captain emerged from the cockpit, a rare sight that immediately hushed the cabin. He conferred briefly with Barbara, whose gestures became increasingly defensive. Several passengers began recording the interaction on their phones. Airline representatives on the ground were now contacting the flight. The hashtag number Justice for Jasmine had exploded online with thousands of shares, and the airline's social media team scrambling to respond. Corporate headquarters demanded an immediate explanation for the delay and the growing public relations crisis. Barbara realized she was losing control of the narrative. Her face flushed with anger as she pointed toward economy class, apparently explaining why Jasmine had been moved. The captain's expression remained neutral, but his body language suggested skepticism. Throughout the cabin, a remarkable transformation was taking place. Strangers who had sat in silent discomfort were beginning to speak to one another, sharing information and expressing outrage. The collective conscience of Flight 2187 was awakening. Jasmine Washington, the quiet scientist who had only wanted to present her research, had inadvertently become the catalyst for something much larger than herself. As the captain made his way toward economy class to hear her side of the story, she took a deep breath and prepared to speak her truth. The resistance had formed, and it was about to take flight. Captain David Harrington had flown commercial aircraft for 23 years. In that time, he'd handled medical emergencies, severe turbulence, and even an engine failure. But never had he stepped out of the cockpit to address a discrimination complaint that was simultaneously unfolding on social media in real time. As he made his way down the aisle toward economy class, passengers fell silent, all eyes tracking his progress. The captain's uniform commanded authority, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Miss Washington?" he asked, stopping beside row 32. Jasmine looked up, her heart pounding. "Yes, sir. Would you mind stepping into the galley to discuss the situation regarding your seating assignment?" Jasmine nodded, unbuckling her seatbelt with trembling hands. The teenager beside her gave her a subtle thumbs up as she stood in the rear galley. Captain Harrington created a small pocket of privacy. Barbara stood stiffly nearby, along with Aaliyah and the first officer. "Miss Washington, I understand there was some confusion about your seating assignment." The captain began neutrally. "Could you explain what happened from your perspective?" Jasmine took a deep breath, determined to remain composed. "I had a first-class ticket for seat 2B purchased months ago by my mother. After boarding and settling in flight attendant, Reynolds told me there was a computer error and I needed to move to economy. When I asked for clarification, she questioned whether I belonged in first class and threatened to have me removed from the flight if I didn't comply. She was disrupting the boarding process, Barbara interjected, and we needed to accommodate a priority passenger. I didn't interrupt you, Miss Reynolds, the captain said firmly. Please extend the same courtesy. He turned back to Jasmine. Continue, Miss Washington. She wouldn't let me retrieve my presentation materials for my original seat, Jasmine added. I'm presenting research at the National Climate Research Conference tomorrow morning, and those materials are essential. The first officer spoke up. Captain, we've received word from headquarters. The situation has attracted significant attention online. The Dollars number justice for Jasmine is trending nationally. Barbara paused visibly. That's absurd. I was following standard protocol for seating reassignments. What specific protocol? Aaliyah asked, breaking her silence. Because in 3 years with this airline, I've never seen a first-class passenger with a valid ticket move to economy without overbooking or equipment changes. The captain's radio crackled. Captain Harrington, this is operations. We have senior management on the line requesting to speak with you immediately regarding the situation on board. I'll take it in the cockpit, he replied. To the others, he said, please remain here. We'll resolve this situation before departure. While the captain returned to the cockpit, the tension in the cabin continued to build. The teenagers who had started the social media campaign were now openly discussing the situation, their voices carrying through economy class. They just moved her because she's black, Riley stated loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. The flight attendant didn't think she looked like she belonged in first class. How many black passengers are in first class right now? Another teenager asked. Several passengers pulled out their phones, ignoring the airplane mode instructions to check the trending hashtag. Pictures of Jasmine from her climate activism work circulated alongside outraged comments about discrimination. Malcolm Turner had returned to his seat but continued documenting the incident. When Mr. Phillips inquired about what was happening, Malcolm showed him the social media storm developing. This is going to be a PR nightmare for the airline, Phillips observed, and rightfully so. In the cockpit, Captain Harrington faced the most difficult conversation of his career. On the video call, the airline's Vice President of Operations and Chief Diversity Officer both appeared their expressions grave. Captain, we're receiving thousands of messages about a discriminatory incident on your flight. The VP stated, what exactly is happening there? We have a situation where a young black passenger with a valid first-class ticket was downgraded to economy without clear cause, the captain explained. The lead flight attendant claims it was due to operational needs, but there appears to be no documentation supporting this decision. Is the passenger still on board? The chief diversity officer asked. Yes, she's currently in economy class. She's apparently a climate scientist presenting at a conference tomorrow. This is precisely the type of incident our new anti-discrimination policies were designed to prevent. The diversity officer said grimly. Captain, we're authorizing you to take whatever actions necessary to rectify this situation immediately. This is being watched by thousands of people in real time. Understood, Captain Harrington replied. I'll handle it. Meanwhile, in the main cabin, Barbara had cornered Aaliyah near the beverage carts. You had no right to undermine my authority, she hissed. I've been flying this route since before you could walk. This isn't about authority, Aaliyah replied calmly. It's about doing what's right. I heard what you said about her being a scholarship case who doesn't belong in first class. Barbara's face contorted with anger. You're making a career-ending mistake. I don't think I am, Aaliyah countered, noticing several passengers openly recording their conversation on phones. When Captain Harrington returned to the cabin, the atmosphere had reached a boiling point. Passengers were openly discussing the situation, with many expressing outrage. The group of teenagers had moved to surround Jasmine protectively, offering support. Attention, everyone! The captain announced, his voice carrying through the cabin without the intercom. I need to speak with Miss Washington and Miss Reynolds. As Jasmine made her way forward, passengers reached out to touch her arm or shoulder in solidarity. Barbara followed stiffly behind her, expression thunderous. In the first-class galley, now crowded with the captain, first officer, both flight attendants, and Jasmine. The final confrontation began. After consulting with airline management and reviewing our policies, I've determined that Miss Washington should be returned to her original seat in first class, the captain stated firmly. Captain, with all due respect, Barbara began. This is not open for discussion, he interrupted. Miss Washington had a valid ticket for seat 2B. There was no computer error, no equipment change, and no legitimate operational reason for her reassignment. I was using my discretion as lead flight attendant, Barbara insisted. Your discretion does not extend to making decisions that could be perceived as discriminatory, the captain replied. Miss Washington will return to first class immediately with our sincere apologies. And if I refuse to serve her, Barbara challenged. The captain's expression hardened. Then you'll be violating company policy and creating a hostile environment, Miss Reynolds. I don't think you want to add insubordination to this situation. Jasmine stood silently processing the vindication she felt at having her experience acknowledged, mixed with lingering hurt from the humiliation she had endured. Miss Washington, the captain, turned to her, his tone softening. On behalf of the airline, I apologize for this incident. Would you prefer to return to your original seat in first class? Before she could answer, the confrontation took an unexpected turn. Miss Washington's seat is ready for her immediate return, Captain Harrington announced as he escorted Jasmine back toward first class. The cabin had fallen silent, every passenger watching the procession. As they reached the boundary between cabins, Barbara stepped forward, blocking their path. Captain, I must formally protest this decision. It undermines crew authority and rewards disruptive behavior. Step aside, Miss Reynolds, the captain ordered quietly. I have worked for this airline for 28 years, Barbara declared loud enough for everyone to hear. I know how to maintain order and appropriate standards on my flights. Miss Reynolds, the captain's voice remained calm, but took on a steely edge. This is your final warning to resume your duties professionally. Throughout the cabin, passengers exchanged glances. The teenagers who had started the social media campaign watched wide-eyed as the drama unfolded. Malcolm Turner stood from his first-class seat arms, crossed a silent sentinel, observing justice being served. Jasmine, caught in the middle of this confrontation, felt a complex wave of emotions. Part of her wanted to retreat to escape the spotlight and just get through this flight. Another part understood that this moment was larger than her personal comfort. I apologize for any inconvenience. Jasmine addressed the cabin with remarkable poise. I just want to get to my conference and present my research. Something about her dignity in the face of such blatant mistreatment touched a collective nerve. A passenger in row 12, an elderly woman with silver hair, slowly rose to her feet. I won't sit down until this young lady is back in her rightful seat, she announced. A businessman 3 rows behind her stood as well. Neither will I. Like a wave, passengers began standing. One after another, a silent protest spreading from economy through premium economy. What is happening? Barbara demanded, looking around in disbelief. A teenage girl with blue hair, Riley, the one who had started the hashtag, stood on her armrest to be seen. We're not sitting down until Jasmine gets her first-class seat back and receives a proper apology. The captain, witnessing this unprecedented display of solidarity, stepped aside to consult with the first officer. Meanwhile, Barbara grabbed the intercom handset. Attention passengers. This is your lead flight attendant speaking. Federal aviation regulations require all passengers to be seated with seat belts fastened before takeoff. Please return to your seats immediately. Not a single passenger moved. If anything, more stood up the protest, now including nearly half the cabin. This is ridiculous. Barbara sputtered into the intercom. You're delaying the flight for everyone. Actually, called out a man in row 20. We're all willing to be delayed to see justice done. Some things are more important than schedules. Barbara looked desperately toward the captain, who had returned from his consultation. Captain ordered them to sit down. Captain Harrington took the intercom instead. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate your show of support. To expedite our departure, I'm officially reinstating Miss Washington to her original seat 2B in first class. A cheer erupted throughout the cabin. Barbara's face flushed crimson. Furthermore, the captain continued, I've just spoken with airline management via video conference. They are watching this situation closely and have authorized me to make appropriate staffing adjustments to ensure a comfortable flight for all passengers." The implication hung in the air as Barbara realized her position was in jeopardy. "This is outrageous," she hissed. "You can't let passengers dictate crew assignments." While this standoff continued, airline executives were indeed watching via video link from the cockpit. The social media firestorm had reached their attention with number Justice for Jasmine now trending in multiple countries, and the airline stock price beginning to fluctuate in after-hours trading. Captain, the airline's chief operating officer, addressed Harrington through his headset. "We have a PR crisis unfolding. The video of Miss Washington being questioned about belonging in first class has been viewed over 2 million times in the last hour. We need this resolved immediately in accordance with our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination." "Understood," the captain replied. "I'll handle it." Back in the cabin, Jasmine found herself at a crossroads. The passenger support had given her courage, but she was acutely aware of how this confrontation might affect her presentation tomorrow. Did she want to be known for her research, or for being at the center of a viral discrimination incident? In a moment of remarkable maturity, Jasmine raised her hand for attention. "Everyone," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I appreciate your support more than you know, but I don't want to further delay this flight. I'll accept an economy seat if Miss Reynolds acknowledges that her decision wasn't based on any legitimate airline policy." The cabin fell silent. Passengers stunned by her grace under pressure. Barbara seized the opportunity. "Fine, there was no computer error, but I maintained that I was acting within my discretion for operational purposes." "What operational purposes?" Malcolm challenged from first class. "Name one specific operational reason why Miss Washington's seat needed to be changed." Barbara's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. "That's what I thought," Malcolm said. "Captain, I believe we have our answer." The standoff had reached its climax. Over 200 passengers remained standing united in their refusal to be complicit in discrimination. The airline executives waited anxiously on the video link, and at the center of it all stood Jasmine Washington, a 16-year-old scientist who had simply wanted to present her research. Captain Harrington made his decision. "Miss Reynolds," he stated formally in light of the circumstances, "and after consultation with management, you are relieved of duty for this flight. Please gather your personal belongings and prepare to deplane." A stunned silence fell over the cabin, broken only by Barbara's indignant gasp. "You can't do this," she protested. "I've never been removed from a flight in 28 years. "There's a first time for everything," the captain replied evenly. "And our passengers deserve better." As airport security personnel boarded to escort Barbara from the plane, the full impact of what had just transpired began to sink in. The passengers, still standing in solidarity, had witnessed justice being served not through corporate policies or public relations statements, but through their collective refusal to remain silent. Jasmine Washington, escorted by Aaliyah and the captain himself, returned to seat 2B in first class. As she settled in, Malcolm Turner extended his hand. "I apologize for not speaking up sooner," he said quietly. "Sometimes we see injustice and hesitate, thinking it's not our place to intervene." "Thank you for eventually finding your voice," Jasmine replied with a maturity beyond her years. Throughout the cabin, passengers finally returned to their seats, the tension dissolving into a shared sense of accomplishment. The flight, delayed by 2 hours, finally began its taxi toward the runway. For Jasmine, the journey had already transformed her in ways she couldn't yet fully comprehend. As the plane accelerated down the runway, she opened her presentation folder and found a note Aaliyah had slipped inside. "Your voice matters. Your presence matters. Your research matters. Never let anyone tell you where you belong." With tears blurring her vision, Jasmine watched Chicago disappear beneath the clouds, carrying with her not just her research on environmental justice, but a powerful lived experience of social justice in action. The captain's voice crackled through the cabin as Flight 2187 reached cruising altitude. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached $33,000 EFT. The flight time to San Francisco will be approximately 4 hours and 15 minutes. I want to personally thank you for your patience during our delayed departure. Sometimes doing the right thing takes time. A smattering of applause followed his announcement. Throughout the plane, an unusual sense of camaraderie had developed among passengers who had just hours ago been strangers. Flight attendants moved through the aisles with renewed purpose, their smiles more genuine, their service more attentive. In the cockpit, Captain Harrington completed his post-takeoff checklist and removed his headset momentarily. The decision to remove Barbara from the flight had not been made lightly, but in his 23 years of flying, he had never witnessed such a clear case of discriminatory treatment. Operations is still dealing with the fallout the first officer informed him, reviewing messages on the company communication system. Corporate Communications has issued a statement saying the airline has zero tolerance for discrimination and is conducting a full investigation. Good. The captain nodded. It's about time we backed up those policies with action. Meanwhile, in seat 2B, Jasmine sat with her presentation notes open but untouched. The emotional roller coaster of the past few hours had left her drained yet strangely energized. Beside her, Malcolm Turner closed his laptop and turned toward her. So climate research, he began conversationally. What's your focus area? Grateful for the normal interaction. Jasmine explained her work on urban heat islands and their disproportionate impact on minority communities in Chicago. Malcolm listened with genuine interest, impressed by her knowledge and passion. I feel I should apologize, he said when she finished. When I first saw what was happening, I stayed silent. I told myself it wasn't my business. Many people did, Jasmine replied without accusation. It's easier not to get involved. That's no excuse, Malcolm said firmly. I've spent my career believing that merit is all that matters, that if you work hard enough, barriers don't exist. Today was educational. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. My mother always says that racism isn't just about people who actively hate. It's also about those who see injustice and decide it's not their problem. Your mother sounds wise, Malcolm acknowledged. I won't make that mistake again. Their conversation was interrupted by Aaliyah approaching with the drink cart. Can I get you anything? All beverages are complimentary today in first class. Water would be great. Thank you, Jasmine replied. As Aaliyah poured the water, she leaned closer to Jasmine. Just so you know, headquarters is in full damage control mode. Number Justice for Jasmine is the top trending hashtag nationwide. The CEO has personally requested a briefing. Jasmine's eyes widened. I never wanted all this attention. Sometimes we don't choose our moments, Aaliyah said wisely. They choose us. After Aaliyah moved on, Jasmine pulled out her phone, now permitted in airplane mode, and found hundreds of notifications flooding her social media accounts. The teenage activists, led by Riley with the blue hair, had transformed a single incident of discrimination into a movement. Climate scientists, civil rights advocates, and thousands of ordinary people had shared her story, many recounting similar experiences of being questioned about belonging in premium spaces. In economy class, Riley and her friends celebrated their successful campaign. The airline just released a statement. One of them announced reading from the plane's Wi-Fi portal. We deeply regret the experience reported by Miss Washington and have removed the employee pending investigation. We are reviewing our training protocols and reaffirming our commitment to equity and inclusion. We did that, Riley said proudly. Well, mostly Jasmine did it by being incredibly poised, but we helped amplify her story. As the flight progressed, the captain received another call from headquarters. The airline's senior leadership had convened an emergency meeting to address both the specific incident and broader concerns about discriminatory treatment. Captain, the Chief Diversity Officer, explained, "The board has authorized me to offer Miss Washington a formal apology from the CEO, lifetime premium status and compensation for her experience. We'd also like to explore having her consult on our diversity training program if she's interested." "I'll pass along the message," the captain replied. "But I suggest waiting until after her conference. She's presenting important research tomorrow, and that deserves to be her focus right now." 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine finally managed to review her presentation without distraction. Her research on temperature disparities between affluent and underserved neighborhoods felt even more relevant after experiencing such a stark reminder of how discrimination manifests in unexpected spaces. Aaliyah stopped by occasionally to check on her, once bringing a dessert from the premium menu just because. Other passengers smiled or nodded respectfully when catching her eye. Mr. Phillips, the businessman who had been given her seat, had requested to move elsewhere in first class, seemingly uncomfortable with his unwitting role in the incident. As the plane began its descent into San Francisco, Captain Harrington made his way back through the cabin during a moment of smooth flying, entrusting the controls to his first officer. He stopped beside Jasmine's seat. "Miss Washington, I wanted to personally ensure you were comfortable for the remainder of our flight," he said. "I've been flying this route for 15 years, and I've never been prouder of our passengers than I was today." "Thank you, Captain," Jasmine replied. "Everyone has been very kind since everything happened." "Kindness is the minimum you deserved," he stated firmly. "Justice is what you received, and only because you had the courage to stand your ground with dignity." As he returned to the cockpit, Malcolm turned to Jasmine. "You know, I've been thinking about your research. My investment firm has been looking to expand our environmental, social, and governance portfolio. Would you be interested in an internship next summer? We could use someone with your perspective." Jasmine's eyes widened. "Are you serious? That would be incredible." "Completely serious," Malcolm confirmed, handing her his business card. "Send me your information after your presentation. And speaking of which, would you like to practice? I'd be happy to listen." For the remainder of the descent, Jasmine delivered a condensed version of her presentation on urban heat islands, gaining confidence with each slide. Malcolm asked insightful questions, helping her anticipate potential challenges from the audience. As the plane touched down at San Francisco International Airport, an announcement came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Francisco. Local time is 2:45 p.m., with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-70s. Please remain seated until we reach the gate. And to our passenger in 2B, Miss Washington, the entire crew wishes you the best of luck with your presentation tomorrow. We have no doubt you'll impress everyone, just as you've impressed us today." Spontaneous applause erupted throughout the cabin. Jasmine blushed, overwhelmed by the support, but also filled with a newfound sense of purpose. What had begun as a humiliating experience had transformed into a powerful reminder that justice was possible when people chose to stand together. As the plane taxied to the gate, Jasmine looked out the window at the San Francisco skyline. She had arrived not just at her destination, but at a new understanding of her own resilience and the power of collective action to transform individual injustice into communal triumph. Jasmine stepped off the jetway into San Francisco International Airport, unprepared for the scene that awaited her. A small crowd had gathered near the gate: environmental activists, local news reporters, and airline representatives. Camera flashes momentarily blinded her as she emerged. "Miss Washington, how do you feel about becoming the face of the Number Justice for Jasmine movement? Can you comment on the airline's response to the discrimination you faced? Are you planning to take legal action?" The barrage of questions overwhelmed Jasmine, who had expected only to catch a shuttle to her hotel and prepare for tomorrow's presentation. Malcolm Turner, emerging behind her, quickly assessed the situation and stepped forward. "Miss Washington is a respected climate researcher who will be presenting important scientific findings tomorrow," he announced firmly. "She'll be happy to address questions about her work at the appropriate time. Right now, she needs to prepare for her conference." Airline representatives approached, looking nervous. "Miss Washington, we've arranged a private car to take you to your hotel," a woman in a corporate uniform explained. "Our CEO would like to speak with you personally when you have time." Jasmine felt her phone vibrating continuously in her pocket. When she finally checked it in the privacy of the airline's executive lounge, she found 37 missed calls and hundreds of messages. The most important one was from her mother. "Baby girl, are you okay? I'm seeing your name everywhere online. Please call me the minute you land." With trembling fingers, Jasmine dialed her mother's number. Jasmine Kendra's voice was thick with emotion. "What happened? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mom," Jasmine assured her. Though her voice cracked slightly, it was intense. But I'm okay now. They're saying you stood up to discrimination and the whole plane supported you. I'm watching videos of people standing up for you. It wasn't just for me, Jasmine explained suddenly, understanding the broader implications. It was about something bigger. People saw what was happening and decided not to be silent. Kendra's voice softened. That's exactly what we need more of in this world. I'm so proud of you, baby. So proud it hurts. Tears flowed freely down Jasmine's cheeks. I remembered everything you taught me, Mom. About holding my head high, about knowing my worth. You did more than remember the lessons, Kendra replied. You lived them. Now, are you ready for your presentation tomorrow? More ready than ever, Jasmine affirmed, wiping away her tears. After promising to call again before bed, Jasmine ended the call and was escorted to a luxury car waiting outside. The driver navigated through San Francisco traffic while Jasmine tried to process the whirlwind of events. Her phone continued to buzz with notifications, interview requests, messages of support, and an email from the conference organizers moving her presentation to the main ballroom to accommodate increased interest. At the hotel, the manager personally greeted her and upgraded her to a suite. Compliments of the hotel, he explained. We stand against discrimination in all forms. Alone in her suite, Jasmine finally had time to reflect. She opened her laptop to find thousands of messages from young black girls and environmental activists worldwide sharing their own stories of being questioned about belonging in certain spaces. The hashtag #WhereWeBelong had emerged alongside Number Justice for Jasmine, creating a global conversation about racial profiling in everyday settings. The airline had issued a formal statement announcing Barbara Reynolds' termination and the implementation of mandatory Antibius training for all staff. Aaliyah Carter had been promoted to lead flight attendant and invited to help develop new training protocols. A knock at the door interrupted Jasmine's reading. A hotel staff member delivered a fruit basket with a note from Malcolm Turner. Your research matters. Your voice matters. You belong everywhere your talents take you. Good luck tomorrow. That night, Jasmine revised her presentation, weaving in elements of her airport experience to illustrate how environmental justice and social justice were interconnected. Urban heat islands weren't just about temperature disparities. They reflected deeper inequities in city planning resource allocation and whose comfort was prioritized. The next morning, Jasmine entered the conference center to find the registration area buzzing with activity. Climate scientists she had long admired approached her expressing both admiration for her research and support for her dignity in the face of discrimination. Miss Washington, a woman in a tailored suit, approached, I'm Dr. Eleanor Chen, Chair of the Environmental Justice Foundation. We'd like to speak with you about doubling your scholarship and featuring your research in our annual report. Before Jasmine could respond, another researcher joined them. And the Urban Climate Initiative would like to offer you an undergraduate research position when you're ready for college. Your methodology for community temperature mapping is exactly the approach we've been looking for. The conference organizer guided her to the preparation room. We've moved you to the main ballroom. Registration for your session has tripled overnight. Are you comfortable with a larger audience? Jasmine took a deep breath. Yes, I think I am. As she waited to be introduced, Jasmine peeked through the curtains at the packed ballroom. Scientists, activists, policymakers and journalists filled every seat with more standing along the walls. Among them, she spotted Malcolm Turner, who had delayed his business meetings to attend her presentation. In the back row sat Aaliyah Carter, who had requested special leave to support Jasmine on her big day. When her name was announced, Jasmine walked onto the stage with newfound confidence. The applause that greeted her was thunderous, extending well beyond the customary welcome. Thank you, she began, when the room finally quieted. I'm here to present my research on urban heat islands in Chicago and their disproportionate impact on communities of color. But first, I want to acknowledge something important. The room fell completely silent. Yesterday, I experienced what many people of color face regularly, having my presence questioned in a space where I had every right to be. That experience reminds us that environmental justice isn't separate from social justice. The same systems that place incinerators in black neighbourhoods instead of affluent white ones are connected to the mindsets that question whether certain people belong in first-class boardrooms or academic settings. Jasmine clicked to her first slide showing temperature variations across Chicago neighbourhoods. These heat disparities didn't happen by accident. They reflect decades of decisions about who deserves shade trees, green spaces, and protection from extreme weather. Just as I experienced yesterday, these are choices about who belongs and who doesn't, whose comfort matters and whose doesn't. For the next 45 minutes, Jasmine delivered a presentation that seamlessly connected data with lived experience science with social context. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. The Q&A session that followed was rigorous but respectful, with prominent scientists engaging deeply with her methodology and findings. Several researchers approached afterward to discuss collaboration opportunities. A publisher asked if she'd consider adapting her research into a book for general audiences. As the conference continued, Jasmine's experience evolved from a single incident of discrimination into a catalyst for meaningful change. The airline announced a comprehensive review of its customer service policies, with Jasmine invited to consult on their training programs. News outlets featured stories examining how racial bias manifests in premium travel spaces, sparking wider conversations about belonging and exclusion. Malcolm Turner followed through on his offer, creating a paid summer internship focused on environmental justice investments. "Your perspective is exactly what our industry needs," he told her. "Sometimes it takes a moment like what happened on that plane to make us see our blind spots." Aaliyah Carter's promotion became permanent, and she implemented a mentorship program for younger flight attendants of color. "What happened with you changed how I see my responsibility," she told Jasmine over coffee during the conference. "It's not enough to privately disagree with discrimination. We have to actively counter it." 6 months later, Jasmine Washington stood at a podium in Chicago addressing the inaugural meeting of the Urban Climate Equity Initiative, a foundation she had created using the settlement funds from the airline and matching donations from corporate sponsors. The program would provide research opportunities for minority students interested in environmental justice. What began as a humiliating experience became a movement, she told the audience, of students, scientists, and community activists. "Not because I did anything extraordinary, but because ordinary people decided that injustice in their presence required their response." In the front row, Kendra Washington watched her daughter with eyes shining with tears of pride. Behind her sat Malcolm Turner and Aaliyah Carter, who had become ongoing mentors and friends. Riley and her teenage activists had transformed their social media campaign into a nationwide student network, documenting instances of discrimination and organizing collective responses. Captain Harrington, now serving on the airline's Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board, nodded appreciatively from his seat near the back. The passengers of Flight 2187 had dispersed back to their separate lives, but many had shared how that day changed their approach to witnessing injustice. As Jasmine concluded her speech, she reflected on how a single moment of being questioned about where she belonged had transformed into a powerful affirmation of exactly where she was meant to be. The path from victim to advocate hadn't been easy, but it had revealed a profound truth. Real change happens when people recognize that justice isn't just about policies and statements. It's about everyday people making the prep choice to stand up, even when staying seated would be easier. The question isn't whether we belong in first-class prestigious universities or executive boardrooms. She concluded, the question is whether we'll build a society where nobody's humanity is up for debate. That journey begins not with grand gestures, but with each of us refusing to stay silent when we see someone's dignity being violated. The applause that followed wasn't just for Jasmine. It was for everyone who had ever stood up in an airplane aisle, spoken up in a meeting room, or refused to accept that some people don't belong in certain spaces. It was for the power of collective action to transform individual humiliation into communal triumph. Jasmine's story teaches us that meaningful change often begins with a single person refusing to accept injustice. While discrimination persists in everyday spaces, collective action has remarkable power to transform these experiences. When the passengers on Flight 2187 stood up together, they demonstrated how solidarity can overcome institutional bias. The story also reveals how silence enables discrimination to flourish. Malcolm's initial hesitation to speak up despite recognizing the injustice shows how even well-intentioned people can become unwitting accomplices through inaction. True allyship requires courage to risk discomfort. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's transformation from victim to advocate illustrates how painful experiences can become platforms for broader change. By connecting her personal humiliation to systemic issues in her climate research, she created a more powerful message about who belongs in which spaces. Remember, discrimination doesn't just hurt individuals, it damages entire communities by silencing important voices and perspectives. When we stand together against everyday injustice, we help build a world where nobody's humanity is up for debate. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and stood up? Or wished you had? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story could inspire others to speak up next time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more powerful racism stories that challenge us to be better allies and advocates. Like this video if Jasmine's courage resonated with you, and share it with someone who needs this message of hope and solidarity. Thank you for watching. And remember, justice isn't just about policies. It's about everyday people making the choice to stand up even when staying seated would be easier.